Fellas, today we're going to be taking a look at how UFC contenders can become the greatest of all time of their division. Now, first of all, I'm going to say that there's multiple contenders in every division, so don't start getting mad if I don't include, your favorite contender. If I'm just going to be including one contender in every division. Now, to be a contender is pretty straightforward. You can't be a champion, you can't be a current champion, and you should be fighting for a belt soon, or have just fought for a belt, something like that. But we're going to be looking at how UFC contenders can become the greatest of all time in their division and overtake the current GOAT. If you agree, please let me know. Same if you disagree. But we're going to go straight in there with the heavyweight division, and I'm going to pick Sergey Pavlovich. He's a rising star in the heavyweight division. He's a huge contender right now. 6 first-round knockouts in a row. And I think to become the greatest of all time, he's competing against Stipe. Stipe, obviously, for me, is the greatest heavyweight of all time. He's got the best resume, few defenses on his record as well. Well, Sergey Pavlovich, obviously, he has to become champion. If you're going to become the greatest in the division, pretty straightforward, become champion. And I don't mind who he becomes champion off. Maybe he fights John Jones and beats Jones. Maybe he fights Godfrey or Aspinall. But I think he needs to become champion, and I think he needs to put a dominant performance on at least 2 other contenders. Whether that's Tom Aspinall, whether that's Cyril Gane, whether that's the winner of Blades versus Almeida. Maybe not Blades because he already finished Blades, but you know what I mean. He just needs to knock out at least 2 other contenders for me, and that should do it. And then he has to get 5 defenses at least. Now Stipe, he's not up there with the 10s and 50. Well, I know no one's got 15, but he's not up there with like the 10 title defenses. So I think Sergey Pavlovich, he only needs around 5 defenses at heavyweight, which is a lot of heavyweight because it's not easy to defend a belt at heavyweight. So I think he needs at least 5 title defenses. And I'm going to say that he can't exceed 5 career losses. Obviously, Stipe lost to Daniel Cormier once. He's lost to Francis Ngannou. And he's probably going to lose to John Jones, let's be honest. But I think Sergey Pavlovich, I think if he's going to be the greatest in that division, he can't exceed 5 career losses. It doesn't matter when he loses, but I'm going to say he can't exceed 5. He's already got 1 loss against Overeem, and I feel like 5 would be too much. So for Sergey Pavlovich, I think that's what he needs to do to become the greatest heavyweight of all time, and he's a chosen contender. Next up, we've got light heavyweight, Yuri Prohaska. Yuri Prohaska, former champion, probably going to be fighting for a belt soon, to be honest, but I'm going to class him as a contender. Yuri's actually got a really good record. Now, he's competing with John Jones, who, it's not just the greatest in that division, it's the greatest of all time. Or at least I think he's the greatest of all time. Yuri Prohaska's got a lot of work if he wants to become the greatest light heavyweight of all time. So, first of all, I don't think he can afford to lose a fight again. Jones has arguably never lost a fight in his life. Some people say, well, he still lost that DQ. Some people say he lost to Reyes. But technically, he's never really lost a fight. Yuri Prohaska has. Yuri Prohaska's lost a fight. Yuri Prohaska, he's already losing when it comes to the record sense of things, but he's got a record of 29-3, which for me is a pretty solid record. He's already got more wins than John Jones. The only problem is he's also got more losses. And to overtake Jones, he needs at least 9 title defenses. Jones has some insane title defenses on his resume. If Yuri Prohaska wants to come close, he needs to get at least 9 for me in the light heavyweight division, and he needs to dominate pretty much every fight. These can't be close decisions or really close fights like Jones had at the end of his career. If he wants to overtake Jones, he needs to dominate everyone, submit people like he submitted Glover Teixeira, KO people like he KO'd Reyes. That's what I think Yuri Prohaska needs to do if he wants to become the greatest light heavyweight of all time. He's already got 3 fights in the UFC. He finished all of them, 2 by knockout, 1 by submission, so he's already on a good start. He just needs to keep it up, and I think he needs 9 title defenses. And yeah, that is how I think Yuri Prohaska can become the greatest light heavyweight of all time. But again, he's kind of in the hardest position because the person he's competing with is John Jones, which is arguably the hardest to compete with. But listen, 9 title defenses, stay at 3 losses only, and dominate pretty much every fight. And I think he could do the unthinkable and become above Jones on the GOAT list, or even more unbelievably, become the greatest light heavyweight of all time. But next up, we've got the middleweight division. I'm choosing Dricus du Plessis. He's going to be fighting for a belt within no time, I'm sure. If he wants to overtake the current GOAT, Anderson Silva, I think he needs to beat Adesanya. That's the one guy, because Adesanya is active. Adesanya is not too far from becoming greater than Anderson Silva. So if Dricus du Plessis wants to become the greatest middleweight of all time, he needs to make a statement and beat the second greatest middleweight of all time, who is Adesanya. And I think if they rematch, because they're probably going to do an immediate rematch, UFC love Adesanya. He's the face of the UFC, so they're probably going to give him an immediate rematch. And I think Dricus needs to beat him there as well. Dricus needs to beat Adesanya every time they fight if he wants to be the greatest. Then he needs to start beating contenders because, well, I don't know, whoever he comes up against in the middleweight division, whether it's Hamzat, whether it's I mean, he's already beaten Whitaker. Whether it's a fight with Jared Cannonier, Sean Strickland, no matter who he fights, he needs to beat all the contenders and beat all these middleweights that either Adesanya has or hasn't beat. I think he needs at least 6 title defenses. Anderson Silva had a lot of title defenses, but I think Dricus du Plessis needs at least 6 if he wants to be on the same level of Anderson Silva. Maybe not in defenses. Obviously, Silva has more, but still. I think 6 title defenses in the middleweight division. I think Adesanya's got 6 title defenses right now as well in his career, maybe around 5 or 6 overall. And he can't exceed 4 career losses. Anderson Silva's actually got a lot of losses on his record. Dricus du Plessis has only lost twice, and he's finished, I think, most of his fights. So I'm going to say he can't exceed 4 career losses because then their losses are going to be too similar. So if he does all this, he's already beaten he's already beaten Adesanya when Silva couldn't, and I know it was an old Silva, but still, he's already got less losses. I think Dricus du Plessis, that's what he needs to do to become the greatest middleweight. Welterweight. Let's pick Belal Muhammad. Listen, everyone's disrespecting Belal Muhammad. Now, he's competing with GSP. Again, this is really hard because GSP is one of the greatest of all time. Some people put him as the greatest of all time. I made a video the other day about who's better, John Jones or GSP. A lot of varies in the comments, but either way, he needs to beat Edwards for the belt. Now, he's probably going to get a title shot soon. Hopefully, not before Covington, but hopefully one day he'll get a title shot. And he needs to beat Edwards for the belt. He needs to do what Colby maybe couldn't. He needs to do what Usman couldn't. And assuming that Edwards is the champion, he needs to make a statement and beat Edwards for the belt. Then he needs to start defending against some tough killers at welterweight. And I'm talking about Colby, Ian Gary, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Whoever he has to face, he needs to start beating some tough contenders. People who he shouldn't be beating, he needs to beat those type of people. Like if he goes out there and defends and beats Shavkat Rakhmonov, we're talking about a real special guy here. And I mean, we all know he's special, but we need to sort of see that he's special and not good as well. He needs at least 7 title defenses. This is GSP you're comparing with here. I think he needs at least 7 title defenses in the welterweight division to at least overtake GSP. He can't afford to lose again as well. I think GSP's only lost twice, and I also put as this last point that Belal Muhammad needs to pray that he can get the Jeff Neal rematch and beat him, because GSP, the 2 people that he's lost to, he's also beaten in the future. So for me, if Belal Muhammad goes out there, and he's already lost to GSP, if he beats not GSP, he's already beaten Jeff Neal. So if he goes out there and beats Jeff Neal in the future, that kind of just exceeds him as the GOAT. And yeah, I think this is what Belal Muhammad needs to do to overtake GSP at welterweight. I'd put Kamaru Usman as the second GOAT, but yeah, this is what I think Belal Muhammad should do if he wants to become the greatest welterweight of all time. Then we move on to lightweight. I've got Justin Gaethje as a contender. He has fought for the belt before, didn't go his way, and he's probably going to be fighting for a belt soon. He's coming off an insane knockout against Dustin Poirier. He needs to destroy Makhachev, because Makhachev is the closest fight he's getting to Khabib. He has fought Khabib before, and in my opinion, Khabib's the greatest lightweight. He has fought Khabib before, didn't go his way, so I think he needs to destroy Makhachev, who's the most similar matchup to Khabib, and he needs to beat him. And if they give Makhachev an immediate rematch, he needs to beat him as well. So I think beating Makhachev is the closest sign you've got to being better than Khabib without directly beating Khabib. Then he needs to beat Oliveira and rematch. I know that he's lost to Oliveira before, but if they give Oliveira a rematch, he needs to beat Oliveira every time now, because Oliveira's climbing up there as one of the greatest lightweights of all time. So he needs to beat the 2 toughest in the division, and then he needs to beat someone like Volkanovski if Volkanovski moves up. Volkanovski's made it clear that he's not done in the lightweight reign. He wants to come back and get the belt again. And if Justin Gaethje is the champ and he beats Volkanovski, Oliveira and Makhachev in the lightweight division, I think immediately that puts him above Khabib. Immediately. Even though he's lost to Khabib and his record isn't as good as Khabib's, I think if he beats those 3 names and rematches one of them and beats him, I think immediately he's above Khabib, because Khabib, 3 title defenses. People are calling Khabib the GOAT with 3 title defenses, which is incredibly... You can't be the greatest of all time with that many defenses. But I respect Khabib for being the greatest lightweight. But if that's what Gaethje was to do, I think that's how he'd become the greatest lightweight of all time. Then we've got the featherweight division. Ilya Topuria, undefeated, probably going to be fighting for a belt soon. And for me, he needs to beat Volkanovski. Now, the good thing about the featherweight division is the featherweight GOAT is actually the current champion. So if he directly beats the greatest featherweight of all time, and if he does beat Volkanovski, which is or would already boost him into one of the best featherweights of all time, if he then beats him in a rematch, you've got to put Ilya Topuria in the top 2 greatest of all time, or at least 3. You've got to put him above Holloway. If he manages to do that and beat Volkanovski, if he beats Volkanovski, of Holloway's probably going to get a title shot. He needs to beat Holloway because Holloway is definitely in the top 3 featherweights of all time. He needs if he's already beaten Volkanovski and Holloway, and well, Volkanovski twice and Holloway, he's pretty much already there as the greatest featherweight of all time. But I'd say he needs at least 4 title defenses to exceed people like Aldo. So he needs at least 4 defenses, whether it's against Volkanovski, Holloway, and then 2 other contenders. He needs 4 title defenses. And he can't afford to lose more than once. Volkanovski's lost twice. One was at lightweight and one was in some random promotion ages ago. So I think if he needs to match that, I don't think Ilya Topuria can afford to lose more than once. Maybe he loses once against, I don't know, whoever it be against, but I think 1 loss and that's it. You can't afford to lose more than that. So that's what I think Ilya Topuria needs to do to become the greatest featherweight. Bantamweight, Merab, he's probably going to be fighting for a belt soon. I don't know why he's trying to get Aljo to fight again. Just fight for the belt, mate. It's your legacy, not Aljo's. He needs to beat O'Malley for the belt because O'Malley's just knocked out Sterling, and Sterling was arguably the top 2 greatest bantamweights of all time. And I know MMA math doesn't necessarily work, but he needs to go out there, beat O'Malley for the belt, beat technically undefeated O'Malley. I know he's not undefeated. Beat O'Malley for the belt, do what Aljo couldn't. Hopefully dominate O'Malley instead. Then he needs to beat multiple styles because we've only ever seen Merab against a kind of striking style. We saw him against Jose Aldo, who's a predominant striker. We saw him against Peter Yan, who's a striker. And if he goes out there and beats O'Malley, it's another striker. I think we need to see him against top-level grapplers, like Umar Nurmagomedov, like even Corey Sandhagen, like maybe his best friend Aljo. I need to see him against more grapplers if I want to, call him the greatest bantamweight of all time. And I think to compete with Dominic Cruz and overtake Dominic Cruz, he needs at least 5 defenses. That's what I think he needs. Aljo's got 3 title defenses. He defended it against Peter Yan. He defended it against Cejudo and TJ Dillashaw. He needs to absolutely destroy Aljo's legacy, get 5 solid title defenses, and I think that's enough to overtake Dominic Cruz in the bantamweight division. So yeah, that's what I think Merab needs to do. Then we move on to the flyweight division. I'm picking Amir Albazi because, listen, I know a lot of people hate him after he robbed Kai Kara France, but he's a contender. Let's be honest. If he gets another win, he's going to be fighting for the belt. He can't lose again. Amir Albazi, you're competing with Demetrius Johnson. You can't afford to lose another fight. He has to stay undefeated for the rest of his career. I think he needs to beat the best. Now, one thing I will say about the current flyweight division is the flyweight division right now is way more competitive than it was when Demetrius Johnson was around. Now, I know that's kind of obvious because obviously as the sport goes on, the skill gets better. But I think if he beat Amir Albazi beating Pantoja and Moreno, who are the 2 best, I think that overtakes everyone. So that's what I'm going to say about Pantoja and Moreno. So if he beats them 2, he's already overtaken them. Then he needs at least 10 title defenses because Demetrius Johnson, he's the greatest bantamweight of all time, greatest flyweight of all time. He needs at least 10 title defenses. He's competing with Demetrius Johnson. I put him in the top 3 greatest of all time. To overtake Demetrius Johnson, you need at least 10 title defenses, in my opinion, which is a lot. But if he dominates the bantamweight flyweight division, doesn't lose again, beats the toughest, and gets 10 title defenses, I think that's enough for him to overtake Demetrius Johnson. But that is my list for the UFC contenders that can become the GOAT of their division. If you agree, please let me know, and thank you for watching.